It is 6:02 on January 27th. This is a Finance Committee meeting. I am Council President Brian Wolf calling the meeting to order. In attendance, we have Councilpersons McNamara, Camera, Koss, as well as Mayor Hughes and Fiscal Officer Leah Klein. So I guess why don't we start with the supplemental appropriations that just got sent out tonight. Why don't you tell us about that?
We didn't have anything appropriated for the Village Facilities Fund for this year. And we do have some things that will be coming out. I know we just had the
There's like asbestos
testing. So we just wanted to prepare for anything that might be coming in using those funds.
I thought the testing was done already and now it's remediation stuff, or is there more testing that needs to
They actually found
Oh, I know they found
more, and so we had to take step number 2.
Oh.
So yes, we have to go. And my understanding, and Eric, this is something you can easily ask Eric because he has been in deep communication with them. But no, there was actually quite a bit more than what was found in the first set of testing.
Oh.
So this is going to entail like actual. Once you disturb it, it has to be removed and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
So my understanding was there was a step that we had to take to get to the bid process and this and that. So there was another step that we had to take.
Got it.
But this is probably not going to be the first and the last time that we're going to see. There were some any additional costs that could come up with the process, getting it to bid and after bid. We just want to make sure that we're not coming to you guys every 5 minutes going, I need $200, I need $500. So this is not a set amount that we are expecting to spend tomorrow, but it is an amount and it's actually just being appropriated from the fund. Is that correct? This is money that I believe there was 68,000 in there, something like that.
That's the balance in the fund. There is still a PO, a remaining balance in the PO for Garmin Miller.
Yeah.
So that's not the available balance, but.
Right. So that's what that was for.
Right. All right. And very good. All right. Did you have things you wanted to bring to us, or we just?
I did not, and I missed the previous meeting with Emmett.
Okay.
I assumed that this was going to.
Yes,
yeah.
it is.
So we can cover that. So.
Okay.
And I thought Eric was, no, I'm gonna let you do it.
Okay.
And I do think Eric was planning on being here. I think he was just gonna be a couple minutes late, so if you guys kinda, wanna go over just the basics of where we're at, what we're doing, and where we're headed.
So we entered into a process with Frost Brown Todd's Financial Advisors wing, right? So we have a separate contract with, the legal firm that we work with. They have financial advisors because lawyers typically don't like to give financial advice. They'll advise you on legal matters. So this allows them to give financial advice. In our discussions with them, what we are working on is finding revenue to be able to afford the building renovation, as well as dredge the lakes and any other funds that we can get together for other projects, right? So what we have been talking about is financing against the future revenue of the TIF, right? So I don't know if you know what a TIF is. Okay, so I just briefly, just in case, it's basically an agreement. So with the MI development, we entered in a TIF agreement so that the amount of the property taxes on that property that went up, those monies, instead of going through their normal distribution channel, they go to a special fund that has to be used in certain ways. And the general rule is it has to be used for the betterment of that section of the village. Right, or the properties that are in the TIF agreement, right? So things that you can use it on are infrastructure projects that would benefit that. So roads leading into that development, bettering the community building would better that section of the village, right? Improving the lakes also benefits that section of the village, and I think the other thing we were targeting was paths or something like that. But those are all legal uses, right? But the problem with the TIF is that, it's money that comes in slowly, right? We're getting it at about $500,000 a year. So $500,000 each year ain't a whole lot to do a lot now, especially when we're looking at 2.2-ish for the building renovation. right? Another million-ish for the lake dredging, I think was the last number,
That's the last of my recollection.
yada, yada, right?
Yeah.
So, and the first 4 million of the TIF funds needs to go to MI. That's part of the arrangement. So, what we are working on with Emmett, and now we have a banker sort of on board from Fifth Third, from Key, is to finance against those future revenues, right? And so we are working on, or what has happened in those conversations is, the first step is letting MI know that we're doing this, right? And potentially negotiating a net present value on the 4 million that we're slowly paying them, right? Because there's a benefit to getting 3.6 million today as opposed to 4 million stretched out over the next 4 years, right? And then we are also working out what rates and stuff we can get along those lines. So that's where that conversation kind of is at this point. I think our next steps, we're a meeting with the banker,
Correct.
whose
I don't-
name I don't remember. Jim, Dave,
I thought it
Bob.
was David.
David sounds about right.
I feel like it's on every email I have, so why not?
Well,
David Tiggett.
Will that leave money left over to do things on that side?
It would not completely encumber the TIF, right? Because we have not talked about borrowing the full value of the TIF. So there is that. The other advantages to doing it this way, right? So the village also has the ability to raise, to issue debt through the form of bonds, right? And the village has the ability to issue unvoted bonds, right? Where us as a council body in concert with bond attorneys can, and probably a bond issuing bank, can just say, yep, we are gonna issue bonds and we raise debt and we pay it off over the 20 years of the bond and such is life, right? Then there's also voted bonds, right? Which we have to then put together the same plan and go out to the voters and say, hey, for these reasons, we need to issue debt. Do you give us permission to do that?
And the amount we can do is higher at that point.
Well,
right?
so it's a total debt limit, and there's a difference between the voted and unvoted. Off the back of my head, I think our total bonding limit was like $3.8 million, if memory serves.
That sounds right.
And it's like 1.7 or 1.8 in unvoted and the rest in voted. It's different, but not so different. So, the other thing is that it's also, right, so, and we would be repaying it out of general funds, which means that we're not encumbering our bond limit. So if we find ourselves in an emergency, we could always issue bonds down the road. So we were kind of getting people up to speed on what we had discussed with Emmett and Emily?
Yes.
Yeah.
Emily or Emma? Emily?
Yeah, Emma.
Emily? Emma.
It's
Emma?
all- yeah.
Yeah. Oh, they're both M names, that's really.
I know.
Oh, yeah, so that's where that is. Do you have questions that I can help make that any clearer?
No, I just, what's the likelihood that we need to go that route? Obviously, we want to be fiscally responsible, so, I mean, how much money do we need? How much are we taking out?
Well-
What's the rate?
I think it's really the
Yeah,
main
we-
option.
Pretty good,
Yeah,
so,
we
right?
don't have a rate yet, but it's going to be,
We should-
the numbers that we've heard so far is below 4%.
Yeah, we
Somewhere
don't
between
want it.
2.5 and 3.5, I think is what we're expecting.
Yeah.
And as far as, is your question, do we need to go that route as far as?
The bond route.
Well, yeah, we need to get debt, because we don't have 2 million sitting in the bank anywhere to do this building,
Okay.
right?
Or
So-
the lakes for
Right,
that matter.
and we also don't have $1 million sitting in the bank right now to do the lakes, so,
Tell me about
you know,
this.
provided we do in fact want to renovate this building,
Yeah.
and provided we do in fact want to bring our lakes to a standard where they're good, clean and healthy lakes that we can then implement maintenance on to help them be good and clean and healthy for generations to come, right? That's just the first step that we've said we have to get done. So,
So are the advisors are they showing us all the options?
yeah, they're working on helping select the instruments that would be best for us.
So it's not just borrowing against the tip?
Yeah, we've looked at both, issuing bond and going through this borrowing against future TIF revenue. But because there is a preference, at least for everybody who's been involved so far, to not encumber our debt limit, right, our bonding limit, we have been leaning more heavily on
Yeah.
going this way. Cause it's money that we would have eventually anyways, might as well get it while the getting's good and we have immediate needs and,
And
Yeah.
inflation makes debt cheap over the long
That's
run,
what
so
I'm
that
saying,
is
it's
one
very
benefit of
cheap.
this era.
yeah, it says about, short of free, and, they don't give out a whole lot of free money,
Yeah.
And even when they do, it's expensive, right? You gotta get a grant writer, you gotta have matching funds, you gotta,
How soon can we lock this in? Cause I'm really good.
I think when we asked them time frame, wasn't it 60 days, we should really have a good idea of,
It's gonna follow along pretty nicely with our bidding, which will be going out next week for the structure.
Yeah,
So it's gonna be, I think, 90 days to get everything completed, because we have to go
Right.
through another public entity, assuming again, we're going through the route that we're thinking that we're going through. That is it takes a little longer, but at the same time, it matches up with going through our process. It's gonna take the end of February to get our bids back. The council and the staff will then work together to rate the bids, you will select a bidder, you will then go through 3 readings, right? And it'll all be concurrent at that point with the debt legislation at the same time.
yeah, cause the rate's gonna go up in March, that's my thing,
Yeah.
is like try to lock that in,
so,
you know what I
so
mean?
these rates are not the same.
Not back.
Yeah, these are not the kinds of rates, like, this isn't something based on prime, this isn't something that is,
Okay.
the Federal Reserve doesn't set this rate.
No, you can look at, it's market derived, because they're municipal type bonds, so you can look at that market to get an idea of what the different rating scales, if you wanna do a little bit of kind of surface,
Yeah.
understanding of how they work. And then, the Port Authority issues it, for Franklin County, and they are.
Port Authority.
Yeah, so every county, yeah, so these are different structures, they don't, we have land ports, like in Columbus, but these are things to deal with airport, airport rail, stuff like that. We don't have a water port here in central Ohio, but you have types of ports. The Port Authority is simply a designation, they're given certain governmental authority, they have a board, and they're able to issue bond,
Okay.
and they're able to issue bonds at a larger debt capacity than Winter Park would. So a lot of municipalities utilize that structure in order to take advantage of, again, as a teamwork effort within, the different governmental entities within our state. That's what we typically do, as a Central Ohio, we would use Franklin County's Port Authority, and they have to approve it and go along with it
Right.
as well. It's not unusual, they do this for other municipalities too, so. And then that scheme would allow us to issue debt not encumbered upon our general fund, and that is preferable, right? So your general fund is still there to do everything else you need to do with it over the
Right.
course of operating
Right.
and capital expenditures.
Right.
You're just able to easily knock off 2 major needs within the village, before the building, something happens to the building, which it's getting old and, not really good to work in. There are many concerns, and we can share that with council over time here. So you're gonna have an expense one way or the other with the structure. And then your lakes are turning into a bog, so if you want a bog, you're gonna get one unless something's done with them, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I get that. I guess my only concern is, you want to get on the ball with the rates, but as long as you can tell me that, hey, we're not super worried about the rates changing very quickly in the next, 60 days or so, like they're talking about.
yeah, it's not something, bond rates are market driven to some degree, and something I don't even know that the Port Authority doesn't necessarily control. It's not like a bank where we lock in our rate over a 30-day period or something, so it's a little bit different. We'll get some more info on how that works, because it's
Yeah.
not my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Financing, I know enough to be dangerous and be helpful,
I
right?
think the best way to think about it is that this process will move along as speedily as we can move it along.
Yeah.
Correct.
And, if by some freak of the universe, rates do something catastrophic in those last 15 days,
Yeah, we're not gonna go.
well, it is what it is, right? We'll have to make a choice then, oh my God, someone, the Port Authority went bankrupt overnight, and now we can't use them as our bonding, as our, what is it, as our rating, source, right? Because we're using their credit rating to issue our debt, so, we'd have to find another way.
Yeah.
But,
Bonds have a reverse function, right, interest to worth, you know, they're a little different, instrument. Odd things can make bonds they're more conservative than the market, so where the stock market may be having certain external pressures like, you know, gas driven or even Putin starting a war in Russia type, you know, issues, the bonds are seen as safe havens, and so they can actually, you know, drive up their value to municipal investors while lowering the rate at the same time. So it's just different, it's a different game, so.
Right.
Okay.
But it's not, again, it's not tied to those indices like we as consumers are used to, right? It's not tied to the prime rate, it's not tied to the LIBOR or the, you know, what's the other one they use for mortgages, the 10-year treasury bill is a
Yeah.
common,
Yeah.
you know, consumer interest rate. This is based on other factors.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure we're making a good decision, but it sounds like this is a little bit safer anyways, so.
Oh, I think it's as safe as it can get, leaving us in our strongest financial position because we are not, you know, we are leaving ourselves open to issuing debt again, if need be, and not encumbering our general fund in a manner that leaves us without money to spend.
Correct.
Right, 'cause it sounds like I might need some money too for streets, just saying.
Yes.
We typically do, a lot of those are the bond ones, because we can do the 0% interest on, the OPWC, which that's what we've done. Nobody loves this process, I hate this process, but you gotta get moving on it now in order to do it 2 years from now.
Yeah,
So, I mean, that's the downside of it, but who doesn't love free money? So,
right.
that's one of the things that we've been able to continue to do those projects, so
And
it's.
I think the financing through OPWC is also outside of our usual
Correct.
bond limit and outside of
Correct.
this. So it's another way to get access to capital that leaves us in as strong a position as we can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like, I mean, you were in Mike Flickinger's thing that, you know, that one pipe was $1 million. Well,
Yeah.
we're not writing a check for that,
You
so,
know I didn't like that, you know I like to save money where I can. I'm not necessarily cheap, we're gonna call it, I like a good deal.
Oh, yeah.
And not sound like a good deal.
okay, well, you're in the wrong line of work on this in here, because I don't feel like we ever get a deal on anything. They're like, oh, your government, how about it's a double?
Yeah. Right, okay, so Jason, you haven't asked many questions. Are
No,
you
I'm good.
clear, you're good?
Okay.
All right, anything, so that's where we stand on financing for the building and lake project. I think we had a question from streets for you, Leah. Did we couldn't remember in the streets meeting if we had in fact budgeted for the,
The street study,
yeah,
yes.
we did.
Yes, there's
Okay.
15,000 budgeted in there for that.
Good, that
Yes.
makes that a lot easier. Yeah, so that,
Okay, we're good.
yeah, we're good. Any other state of the village things we should be looking out at or looking for? Danger, oh, you got something.
That's good. You're first.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, no, not yet. It's
Okay.
Well, let me point out just, and we can talk about it in legislation or here, but you are gonna see some passing as an emergency tonight for some of the levy accepting the rates or amount. So it's just it's
Talk about it here or in
procedural, I know.
legislation.
Yeah, I know you're familiar with it, but I
Yeah.
don't know if anybody wants to talk about it in legislation or if we wanna talk about it in finance as far as
well,
that goes.
Well, I think it's a legislative.
Perfect, we'll do that
procedure,
one in the
so
next
we'll do
one.
it in the next meeting.
I just know it came from Leah.
Huh? Yeah, there's a legislative committee meeting between this and the council meeting.
Yep.
Yeah, so what was yours?
So, and on that note, though, you know, we'll talk fee schedule, because it's legislation based, but it is driven by need of
Yeah.
influx. So there's a request to double that up for the right-of-way fees, since we're having a lot of, due to the schools and fiber and other things that they're doing. That one's fairly straightforward. The one that's more pertinent from an kind of a crossover one is our code rewrite. So we'll need, at most, and not to exceed 35,000 to do that, is what number I got back from our Frost Brown Todd. Now,
That was the other one.
they are conservative in their estimate. Jesse and I believe that, you know, again, our code is not voluminous. Frost Brown Todd, I think, much like a lot of municipal attorneys, codes are, as we know, can be tricky.
Yes.
Could involve a lot more, and some codes are hugely voluminous, like if you compare Columbus and
Well-
Dublin, it's nowhere near the comparison.
It would,
So they're worried about extra time, but since Jesse's familiar with it, he's gotta go to his bean counters to get a quote.
Right.
We believe it will be somewhere in the 20,000 range, we don't think we'll get up to 35.
It would be good if as a goal we could slim it,
Yes,
Yeah.
right?
but they're gonna quote us at 35, so we'll have to appropriate 35.
Do we have that 35
Yeah.
to appropriate, Leah?
Because I just brought this
I
up now.
do, yeah, I know.
I just got that
You
today.
caught me off guard.
Yeah,
I
that's fine.
will, I'm gonna take note on that. I'm gonna
Right.
check.
Do we have,
Let's see what-
is there legislation?
No,
No, there's not
No,
legislation, so this is just a
This
heads
has
up.
just happened, because we're gonna
Right.
talk
Got
about
it.
legislation, and everybody's good, I mean, I'm assuming people are supportive, since we need to clean it up, and it's a
Yeah.
one-time fee for the next 50 year type
Yeah,
thing,
we've
right?
had too much heartache and headache about,
Yeah.
It's already
sections of
cost us money.
It has cost us money.
So, yeah, that's the thing, is like, if we fix it now, it'll probably not cost us like 2 years down the line when somebody else has a
I concur with that.
well, I think a lot of, the past has always been a lot of more reactive instead of proactive, and I think that's really, I don't wanna say we're being proactive, because we're kinda being reactive, but at least this is a new group that is trying to be
Right.
proactive.
it's a leap forward.
Yeah,
It is.
Yeah, that code, I am not. I am
No,
not
it's-
a fan, I can say that on the record.
oh, no,
Thumbs down.
It's been band-aided a lot since 1989, that was the primary adoption of the majority of that code, and there's been significant changes in the 2000s, i.e. building code by the state, which we don't need, or a building code, really, we can almost get rid of that chapter, which I suspect we will. Our maintenance code we adopted it from the ICC, just a couple years into my tenure here. That's the most modern code, I expect that to not be touched at all, because it's all good. But other than the maintenance code, most of our code, chapter 12, and, other sections need addressed. This will also include our police code, because we could use some updates to certain sections, and then, although we keep it fairly in line with, changes to the state law, and everything can use a little brush up.
definitely.
All right, so I think from a finance perspective, Leah, by the time we have the ordinance in front of council for consideration, we just need to know that we do in fact have the money available to appropriate at the same time.
And you said 35.
30,000.
Just ask her for money,
Yeah, that's what we're good at.
Yeah, I guess I'm good at
Government-
that too in general.
Government spends money.
Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of the service while we're on that topic, it's one of those things, the intent is not to, you provide services, and so it's not to save money, because you can't keep it as a bank. In fact, the state discourages you from doing things like that, you have to
Yeah.
form a CIC to be able to hold money and make money on it, right? So there's a whole different ballgame there. The intent is to take your taxpayer dollars, either don't tax them, or you need to provide services, right? It's one or the
Yeah.
other.
That's actually a good lead-in, that I have a question for you guys. I've been approached multiple times about the RITA and how nobody's really a fan of the RITA. Based on our financial situation, how feasible is it to decrease that? Because I think we're one of the highest taxed
So
villages in the state.
Do you mean, so there's two questions there, so there's RITA, which is the service what we utilize to get our taxes, and
Just the 2%?
so you're saying, so you're on the tax rate of our.
Right, not who's collecting it
Right.
for us.
Which does matter, actually. We
Right.
can't-
Oh, yeah, no, that's not the
I'm not a
question.
huge
She's,
fan of RITA in general, because when I lived in Cal, they sent me a nasty gram, and forever they're on the bad
I
list,
mean,
but.
nobody's
Well,
ever gonna be happy
I'll-
about whoever's
Yeah.
collecting the
But I don't
tax,
care
right?
about that, what I'm asking is there a possibility, or with all these kind of expenditures,
I'll-
the streets thing, maybe the answer is no?
Not yet.
But
Yeah.
I just need an explanation, I guess, to just understand.
Let me give you a couple things. First off, we've actually met with another company that is, not Rita, but it's something that we just wanted to revisit. It's the second time we revisited it since I've been here.
Uh-huh.
We sat down, myself and Leah, don't ask me what the company name was, cause I think Eric just asked which one it was too, and I can't think off the top of my head, but
I don't remember it's the city of
Cleveland, I think it's Cleveland, yeah.
Oh.
So we are in the process of comparing, and seeing if that's something that would be beneficial, and, we asked all of the questions, how is it to merge and all of that, that's not really where you're going with that question, but just so you know, we have talked to another company, for pricing purposes and all of that. Number two, obviously we all live here, so none of us are fans of Rita and all of that, but that is our basically number one source of, 2% income. We don't have commercial properties, so the first thing I tell people is, if we had commercial properties like many of these other areas, we wouldn't have this issue. But our largest commercial properties, they're not paying our bills. They're not paying for millions of dollars in sewers, and, you know, you can say, well, why weren't these things done 15 years ago? They didn't have the money 15 years ago, now we have all of those new houses, so is that going to make a difference? Eventually, yes and no, because, I mean, again, he's shaking his head no, and he's not wrong. You now have maintenance over there, you now have twice as much sewers, twice as much water lines, you get the point. So, because we don't have the income that other people have, I don't see it happening in the near future. I don't.
I mean, so I'll tell you my perspective on this, right? And that is that,
Look at you and your
you know,
packets.
kind of like what Eric was saying, that a government's job is to provide services, right? So, you know, we can look at what services we wanna provide, and if we don't wanna provide all the services we're providing, then we can look at reducing our revenue,
I guess,
right? But,
And I'll jump onto that, if I may. On the end, I would say in 3 years' time is a good moment for you to reassess. And the reason I say that is because all your schools, which will be your highest employer at that point, you
Yeah.
can see the budget, they'll be fully online and will be receiving their taxes in 3 years' time. So in 2025,
okay,
you should have a good look at it at that point.
yeah, I think that's a fair answer. I'm not saying, obviously, nobody's a fan of Rita ever, but it's just I've been approached with that question, and literally, the thing is, we have more houses, why are we still paying the same tax rate? That makes sense.
because more houses mean more services.
Right, so, but it does make sense, but I feel like, first of all, there's a lot of backlog of things that we have not done that we need to catch up on
We're
before
only-
something really bad happens or keeps happening. And yeah, there's.
The other perspective to throw in there is that we are only about 8 years from the point at which the village turned out its pockets and said, we are flat broke.
Yeah,
Right, so 8 years ago, the village couldn't afford to mulch its flower beds. Right, 8 years ago, the village couldn't afford to publish the newsletter, right? The MPCA was covering all that cost on an IOU, right? So 8 years ago, this village was.
11 years
Or
ago,
maybe it was 11 years.
well, no, it would be 8 years ago, but I was giving the full history of it. 11 years ago, John Kasich was elected governor of Ohio. John Kasich thinks small municipalities like this are redundant and shouldn't exist.
And took away the small
As such,
government.
he took away the small government fund.
Or
saying-
greatly reduced.
Greatly
That's
reduced.
right, and this place relied heavily on.
Yeah.
And that's where
Yeah.
most of the money came prior to
That
2010.
makes sense.
He said, why are you even a place? You should just be Columbus or Glendon
So-
or one of those other places around.
So we're
here.
gonna starve you out.
So we're gonna starve you out.
Glad
So then
you're
you
not
have 3 years of no money coming in,
Right.
with
because-
things piling up, brings you to the 8 years ago where we're out of money. We
Bizarre.
pass an income tax or we fold and hope
I
it's
think-
Glendon that takes us and annexes us instead of Columbus or
If memory serves,
whomever.
yeah, for those 3 years, our effective income tax rate was either 0.5 or 1/4%.
Yeah, not enough to survive on.
Which was not enough to survive on,
Even
and,
Powell at 3/4 couldn't survive on, they had
Yeah.
to raise theirs and get things changed. You can't maintain your,
yeah.
your infrastructure.
Do we have the option of annexing in some of this commercial space
The
around this?
only thing, it's kind of a no, we looked at some ability over to this side, because we're surrounded by Columbus, so Columbus isn't gonna release, and isn't gonna de-annex. Even though quite frankly, we could provide better service to say this commercial's up here,
Right.
Columbus is gonna give us the big middle finger, right?
Yeah.
There's way for us then to pressure us because of our sewer agreements and fire now and all kinds of
Yeah,
stuff.
we got
So-
$1 million a month for a fire truck.
Yeah.
So we really have to,
When I-
there's might be able to do some things township-wise, like Glendon would have to, maybe it's a future conversation with Glendon, I mean, it's interesting. They've approached us in kind of a strange way about us completely taking over the township that's underneath us, right? Because right now, like a lot of small municipalities, we have an underlying township that provides
Right.
certain services. Now, in certain places, like the Liberty and Powell, they provide the fire department, so you really need them, and it's better that someone else maintains the fire. In this case, we have Columbus. But they don't wanna plow our streets anymore, and they feel they don't have enough money. Now, I was very surprised to hear this on the phone from the administrator. I think they're looking at it a little backwards, because you generally don't give up these areas simply because they are a long-term revenue stream, but they've got their own mindset about it. My argument would be a little different in giving this some thought. I would almost reverse it to the township and say, look, if you're sick of getting annexed, if you're sick of doing this stuff, then you could, in fact, become a municipality. I mean, we've seen it happen in a couple of cases, some good, some bad, but the municipality becomes all of the township, which could include the village at that point, so it could be Village of Winter Park, but it might be the city of Winter Park, because you might get enough ground that way if they all make sense. It's possible to merge, so there are different possibilities
Alright.
to make it happen, but those are a little bit long-term discussions, you know, about how far to go.
Huge conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll
So
take time. So I'm just bringing them up that
think-
there are things, but.
Yeah, I think we're 2 minutes over on our finance committee meeting. We'll wrap up on, does anybody else have anything for finance committee? If not, I will, move that it come to a close, so just go ahead and stop your recorder. And then, this is the other recorder, so it's the stop